everybody. I'm Shelly Palmer, and welcome to Cannes. We're here at the unbelievable MasterCard Villa. You can see behind me the sea behind, but you have to see the villa, actually. We've had an unbelievable day, and I am honored to be here with Duncan Crabtree-Ireland, who is a National Executive Director and Chief Negotiator of SAG-AFTRA. And we're going to talk a little bit about SAG-AFTRA. Duncan, how are you?
I'm great, and it's such an honor to be talking with you, Shelly.
So great to see you here. All right. You have gone through what I think may be considered the toughest negotiation of all time on the actors contract, and it was focused so heavily on AI, although many other things as well.
Right.
That's got to be the first question I ask you, and I know everyone's asked it to you, but okay, tell me about it.
Well, it was a really tough negotiation. I don't know if it was the toughest one of all time, but for us, I mean, it had been 40 years since we've been on strike in this contract. This is our contract that covers this major studios, television, and streaming, yeah. Right? And so really, like you said, one of the key issues in this negotiation was AI. I do agree with what you said. We ended up with a 128-page memorandum of agreement from this contract. 16 pages of it is related to AI. So yeah. AI is a big chunk, but it's far from the only important issue. But it is the issue that really captured I would say, hearts and minds of the public and of the industry at large, because I think everyone realizes how relevant it is to all of us. And so a lot of the stuff we do is very specific to actors and performers. This is something that I think had a broad impact, and people then and now are really interested in it.
Full disclosure, been a card-carrying member of Screen Actors Guild and after when they were separate unions since I was really quite young, actually, and still am. A card-carrying member of SAG-AFTRA.
Yeah, for that, and thank you.
Yeah, no. Oh, believe me, the union has done great things, but I've also been a signatory to this agreement for my entire professional career, my production company. So I got a foot in both camps, right?
Absolutely.
Singer-songwriter, voiceover actor, my whole career. And then, we're a production company, so we produce stuff. This contract came up and I knew it was going to be particularly tough. And I think the reason it resonated outside of the narrow industry is that we're all scared about what AI is going to ultimately evolve into. We have to pretend all technology is already mature. Right. Because it's going to get better every day. And in fact, we're living on the exponential and have been forever. And this stuff is coming as fast as I've ever seen it.
And also people feel like if you're not ahead of the curve, you're behind the curve. And nobody wants to be behind the curve with this kind of technology that's potentially world changing.
So there are two kinds of ways to think about AI. You can think about it as replacing humans, the magic of human creativity. And a lot of people misinterpret what that even means. And you can think about it using it as super automation for executional excellence or just efficiency or productivity. And so what fascinated me, I read the agreement, I read the memo as soon as it was available. Obviously, there was a lot of union communication. You were very careful to sort of delineate what you believe was execution, what you believe was creativity, and what are human qualities of actors and actresses and voiceover talents. And I'd love you articulate not only a little bit about that, but also talk to me about like the big feelings around this contract, because everybody's got big feelings.
Yeah, everyone does. And I mean, I'm the first to acknowledge there is a group of our members, I can't quantify the exact percentage, but let's call it 10%, who strongly feel that we should just be doing everything in our power to block AI, period. We should be trying to stop it from happening. And obviously we considered that strategic approach, but the reality is, if you look back at labor history and just at history in general, trying to stop technology has never been a winning strategy, and it's not going to be a winning strategy now. So we consciously decided we are not going to go down that road. We're going to go down a road of looking to use every bit of power and leverage and influence that we have to channel the direction of AI implementation in the industry we're responsible for, so that we can focus on exactly how you described it, that AI should be used to augment human capability rather than to replace human work. And I do have to put in a plug, because, the whole labor movement would point out that there are things that some people say, oh, well, it'd be great if this work just went away, that to other people is a core part of their identity as a human worker. And so that is an issue that we have to deal with as a society at large. But for our purposes, for actors and performers, creative professionals in the entertainment industry, it's the creative work that we are most focused on. And as you, I think, rightly said, in our contract, we specifically focused on those issues, making sure that for performers, their face, their voice, their performance, their name even are crucial elements of their identity and their persona. And that shouldn't be duplicated and done without their consent, without their compensation. So we talked about that issue. And we also talked about where Gen AI was going and how we could make sure that as those capabilities expand and more potential exists for fully synthetic performances, that is done in a way that is, if it's going to be done at all, that is, human centered. But that's a real challenge.
So there are 160,000 some odd SAG-AFTRA members, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
And, but there's a Pareto curve in there where a small percentage of the actors are the highest paid and most in demand. And then, there's people who don't act that often. I'll just say that.
Yeah, that's true.
Or work that often.
Right. It's hard to get work as an actor. It really
always has been.
I'm married to an actor, so I know this firsthand. And it is, if you haven't sort of hit that sweet spot in your career where people are coming and offering you jobs, it is the biggest part of the job is finding the job.
To be sure. Bill St. James, one of the most famous voiceover actors of all time, voiceover performers of all time. You've heard his voice on a million commercials. He's the voice of NBC for a lot of years. Used to say there are 5 stages of your career. Who is Bill St. James? Get me Bill St. James. Get me a Bill St. James type. Get me a young Bill St. James. Who is Bill St. James? Right? It's a tough gig.
It is.
Always has been.
And that's one of the reasons why I think our members stay very attached to the union, even, throughout their entire career. And I think it's because people recognize, people who've had to fight that fight to become really successful in the entertainment industry recognize how volatile that success can be, and that they really, even at the peak of their success, they need the union. And I think AI is actually a great example of that, because I've had many, many very top tier agents and talent tell me that they cannot make headway on AI with the major studios individually.
Well, this is where I was going. So you've got a small group of people who are relatively powerful for a short period of time, some for a lifetime, but not all. And then you've got the vast majority of the union members who are rank and file union members, and they're just there to get what jobs they can get, and getting the job is the job. We're living in a world now where a company called 11 Labs has about 4 super popular synthetic voices. And if you go on Reels on Instagram or YouTube Shorts or TikTok, you are very likely to hear those voices as the voiceover to an entire generation. You could call it Gen Alpha, Gen Z. It doesn't matter where you place it. People who are likely to be spending a lot of time on TikTok or with short video content. They believe that it's authentic when it's synthetic. Like, that is actually what they want. It's very similar to when we went from landscape video to portrait video because of mobile phones, right? All of a sudden, vertical video is just like, it's so incredibly accepted. In fact, it's the preferred format for everybody who holds a phone, which is everybody at this point. And so is the union up against, is this Sisyphusian? Is there no way in the world you guys win this and you're just delaying it? And I don't mean to push back that hard, but at a certain point, you got to say, guys, there's a behavioral change in the consumer. There's the reality of the technology coming as fast as on the exponential as it's ever come. And we're really seeing a step change. And then, we're holding on to a business philosophy from a century ago.
Right.
Discuss.
Yeah, so we have to be realistic about that, right? And the industry has always changed. I remember vividly, I've been working at the union for 23 years. I remember vividly when everyone was afraid that YouTube was going to mean the end of the television networks and the studios. Sure. And of course it didn't. It had impact, but it wasn't the end of that. And so I think that the reality is we have to also change with the times and recognize how all of our industries are morphing. And we're here right now at a, conference that is focused on marketing, advertising, et cetera. So let's talk about influencers, for example. We just, about 2.5 years ago, released an influencer agreement. This is an agreement that's specifically designed so that influencers who have brand deals can actually cover those brand deals under a SAG-AFTRA contract, get their benefit contributions that way, do it under union terms and conditions, but do it in a way that's really different than anything we've done before. We had to evolve our own approach in order to make that work. And so that agreement has been hugely successful. We have tens of millions of dollars of annual earnings under it now, and it's growing really rapidly. And this is after only 2.5 years of its existence. And you probably noticed, Shelly, last year during the strike, a whole bunch of influencers and content creators, even those who weren't members of SAG-AFTRA, came out publicly and said, we support what the union is doing. Yep. We reject the studio's attempts to get us to take the place of striking actors and do promotional work for them. And obviously some did, but I think that was a really powerful moment because it delivered a message that creative talent can stand together and that they have something and will always have something unique. So it is true. There are 11 Labs voices that have become, for a lot of social media posts, the sort of standard narration. But I think for brands, for the kind of work that typically has been and will be covered by SAG-AFTRA contracts in the future, that want something unique and want something that is tied to their brand and connects with the audience, I think there is very much going to be work to be done there. I do think digital replication of voice is going to be huge in that area. And that's why we have contract provisions that specifically cover that. And I should say not only for actors, but also we represent recording artists and singers. And we've got that in our newly released sound recordings code with the major record labels. We have it for some of our video game contracts, and we're still fighting that battle with the video game companies now. So this is something that I believe will come to pass in all of our contracts, including in our commercials contract, which we'll be negotiating next year. So,
speaking as a producer, not as a singer, voiceover talent, I want to get some kind of handle, some kind of control over production costs, which have gone crazy. And, you know, the biggest cost is talent. I mean, almost always. Occasionally you come to a location like this, you might say the location is
because your cost factor. Yeah.
Well, let's face it, we're worth what they're paying us, but the location they had to come up with, right? Yeah. So, but in general, you're always trying to, every place you can, increase your margin and decrease production costs, and talent's such a giant part. And I can remember 30 years ago, you'd have an agency cost controller show up at a recording session just to make sure that you weren't padding contracts or you weren't putting a secretary on the contract or everybody was really singing. If you said you had 6 singers, they wanted to know that the agency just wanted to know there were really 6 people in that room singing, as opposed to, 3 people and then you're like adding 3, like your mom and your dad and whoever, because people were abusing these contracts pretty heavily back in the day. Very lucrative deals when it came to residuals and what have you. Now, when I look as someone who's trying to produce content and talent being what it is, I am so, and I'm talking for all producers, so highly motivated to cut my costs. But I don't know if the union or even the actors understand. Maybe they do. They're sacred. They're only this is a triangle that's like, the only analogy I can use, if you remember back when Michael Jackson had like Thriller out.
Yeah, of course.
And it had sold like a gajillion copies. And then there was everybody else. Like, you had 2 albums in a row. I think it was Bad and Thriller, like 23 million and 18 million. And the one that sold 18 million was considered a failure. Right. But the rest of the music business, like 1 million albums was considered like the lifetime achievement. You sold 1 million or 2 million albums. And so you get a Tom Hanks. There aren't 20 Tom Hanks. There aren't. I mean, all of these people are unique and beautiful and gifted and talented. I get on the list. So no one's, you wish their quote was lower, but the quote isn't lower because they bring some magic to what they're doing.
Right.
But that just doesn't apply to the worky work where you're sitting there going, let me find a voiceover that works here. Okay. And it works.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's true. Although, there are plenty of examples where there is something special, even for non-celebrities. So I think we should distinguish between celebrities and people who bring a unique quality to a particular work that they do. And I think there is room for both of those scenarios. And I do also just want to point out, I mean, we were very concerned going into last year's negotiations about what would happen with background actors for the exact reason that you're articulating. And the result of that in our negotiation was that the studios and streamers have committed to hiring human background actors up to the covered numbers on every SAG-AFTRA covered.
Well, how long can that last?
I think it will last, because the truth is that that's not the driver of the costs that you're.
No, it isn't.
The driver of the costs that you're concerned about really are the quotes of the top level talent, and that's a negotiation.
If you think about it, let's push back a little bit, right? So I don't know, I have 100 extras. I'm making this up.
Yeah.
I got craft services for 100. I got hot meals for 100. I got, trailers. I got wardrobe and makeup. It's like their hair and makeup and wardrobe. I mean, it's a trickle down, right? I mean, from me from a production perspective, it's like, let's say I only needed 10 background actors, or extras. 90 less people everything gets cut.
Well, no, you mean, and you don't, I'm not, just to be clear what I'm saying, you're not saying you have to hire a certain number of background. I'm saying that if you're going to use any form of those background, you have to hire them as humans. You can't just replicate them digitally without paying them for that. But I'm not saying you have to hire a number of background you don't need. But of course, commercials are very different than feature films and television projects, et cetera. But I also think, when we look at AI and the capabilities, digital replication alone, it does have the ability or the possibility of streamlining and lowering production costs because, without that technology, you had to do reshoots, you had to fly top tier talent out somewhere again, you had to get a location again, et cetera. Now, maybe you can do that entirely virtually using AI technology. There are costs that are not necessarily creatively central to the project.
Yes.
That can actually, that's the kind of space in which I think we see a win-win kind of scenario.
So we just got a few minutes left. Let's talk a little bit about the future. What's coming. All of the main AI companies are trying to get to AGI or ASI. Yep. They're all trying to be as multimodal as possible. We've got music production, video production, still production. Like everything is happening. And everything is pointing towards, I'm not going to say press a button, get it done, but whether they get there or not, that's the goal. So we know that everyone's on that trajectory and they're not even denying it at this point, right? This is what they're trying to do. Talk to me about, and we know what the struggle is, but what's the role of the union in a world where literally everything is just going that way? And how do you see SAG-AFTRA's role?
Well, first of all, let me say, I see the role of all of our members, and that's not only the actors, it's also recording artists, it's also broadcast journalists. I see the role of all of our people as being unique because what they all bring, every single one of them, is a special connection to the audience. And that is where I think we see the innate value that our members can bring that I don't think can be replaced, at least not completely, by AI technology. And I acknowledge there's, AI influencers and quite a few of them.
Yeah, there are.
But, when you think about the folks who have the biggest impact, none of them are AI. And in fact, I will just point out to you last year when we were on strike, every one of those big tentpole theatrical releases after Barbie and Oppenheimer, when our promotion ban took effect, was rescheduled. Well, almost everyone was rescheduled because the companies knew that without the actors building that connection, driving that audience, their economic success wasn't going to be there. And what we know is all of these companies in all of these industries are driven by economics. So my goal is to make sure that they all understand the value that's created by the creative human talent that they employ, that is what makes their companies unique. Their company, the only reason why each one of those studios is unique is their relationship with talent. If that's not central to what they're putting out, any company can do what they can do. Any company with the right algorithm, OpenAI, can do what Warner Brothers, Disney, Paramount can do if there's not a unique human talent relationship there. Same thing with the labels, same thing with advertisers, frankly, same thing with video game companies. So I think everyone needs to look at this and recognize that there's something special, there's something unique here, and that's what our talent and other creative talent like writers, directors, et cetera, bring. So with that in mind, we do have to acknowledge Gen AI is going to have a huge impact, but we can work together to find the way for that to work. We have provisions now. I think I'd mentioned to you the other day when we were talking in our new sound recordings code, we have a specific provision that says if a record label decides to create and release a track using entirely synthetic voices, not replicas of a real person, but a made-up person singing, right? That those record labels will make payment of the royalties that they would have paid to a human artist through a fund that we've established so that it can, one, mitigate the impact on human performers, and number two, make it so the economic incentives aren't there, or at least not as strong, to go down that synthetic path. So those are the kinds of things that are on my mind, but it's all evolutionary. And this is not people said to me after the strike, aren't you glad you get to stop talking about AI? And I was like, no. I mean, I would be glad, but that's not the case. And no. I don't see any of us, certainly not you and not me either, stopping talking about AI anytime in the near future, because this technology is evolving so fast, our response has to evolve too to keep up with it.
At the speed of AI, Duncan Crabtree-Ireland, the National Executive Director and Chief Negotiator of Screen Actors Guild. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you, Shelly.
I really appreciate it. And that's it. We'll see you next time. I'm Shelly Palmer for Brand Innovators, hosted by MasterCard. We'll see you next time.